Imagine if you never grow up from being afraid of strangers. Some people don't actually grow up from this and they are afraid of things that don't make sense. I've always been allergic to cats. One of them walked in and I was just like pet the little cat. Like 30 minutes later, I look full on demon possessed. I have to sleep to get it to go away. And the Holy Spirit says, that's exactly what happened with your minds. Cats were no longer in the picture, but they left a residue. And the residue left a physiological response. Your brain has been programmed a specific way, and we have to learn how to let the programming drift away and replace it with new programming. If you're desperate for safety, you'll never be desperate for God the right way, because this is not in his nature. He's going to take you to places that don't fulfill that craving. We're going to talk about subconscious programming. So I'm at this place where I'm sleeping again. I'm feeling a lot better during the day. But I'm waking up in the morning and I wake up trapped. And I have to work my way through the anxiety, the worry, the trauma. Are we going to lose everything? Are we going to lose the house? Are we going to lose our businesses? And none of this stuff makes sense. It's not really coming from circumstances. I remember walking one day to our offices at the time, and I called one of our staff members. I couldn't remember what we were doing, and I just sort of like snapped into a fear paradigm. And I'd been good for a little bit, and I just was convinced that we were running out of money. So I called her and I was like, batten down the hatches. We need to tighten up. She's like, what are you talking about? Everything's good. We're like growing. But I couldn't reconcile it. There was like different pieces of my memory that were coming up to the surface. And I would get it under control because we're good at doing that. We can sort of like talk ourselves into feeling good. And we're like, yeah, we're going to make it. If the worst thing that happens is we die, it's fine. I feel really good. And I would go to bed feeling great. I would wake up the next morning and I would be convinced that we are going broke, we're going to die, we're going to lose everything, and I'd have to like start over again every single morning. Yeah. The sleep was good. And I eventually was like, I think I might be broken. Maybe that's what they call this, when you can't really hang on to a belief system. And where I was on a walk one time and the Holy Spirit started saying, you need to start speaking different things over yourself out loud. I said, okay, I'll try that. I'm on this walk with Holy Spirit anyways, and he's telling me the dumbest stuff, and so I might as well try it. And he said, go for a run. And I said, hold up. I don't run. He said, go for a run and start speaking these phrases. And I did that one time. But I hate running. At the time, I hated running. And I kept asking him, like, what's wrong with me? What's going on? And he said, you have areas in your mind that are just programmed from the past. And you have to start speaking these things. And I was like, okay, I'll speak to him. He's like, no. You need to run. I was like, I'm not running. I don't like it. He had me get a cold plunge one day. And so I got a cold plunge. And he said, say these 3 things on the cold plunge. Have you ever cold plunged? It's like your body thinks it's dying. And I got in this cold plunge for the first time. I like saw Jesus. And I can barely talk, but I'm in there and I'm saying these 3 words, these 3 phrases over and over. I am safe. I am protected. I'm unafraid. And you don't feel safe. You don't feel protected. You feel very afraid in a cold plunge. And I would do it every day. Every day I would say these things. And what I started to learn in hindsight is that there's a wall that like the subconscious mind will sort of like put up, and you can look at yourself in the mirror and you can say affirmations all the time and your brain's like, you're a liar. It's not going to accept them. But something happens in these like moments, they call it autophagy, when it's almost like there's so much biological stressors around you that those walls come down a little bit and they become more accepting of programs. I didn't know any of this at the time. But this is why, like, if you go for like a long distance run, your brain is sort of going to accept programming a little bit easier than if you're just sitting here drinking coffee. If you're in a cold plunge, if you're fasting and you're like in full-on autophagy ketosis, there's a programmatic layer that kind of comes off of you and it allows you to program into it. And I started unpacking all of this and why God was having me do this. And the things that I learned, I had to go look up because he would tell me. One day, Dr. Russ, he told me that one side of my hippocampus was corrupted or had corrupted things. But I thought there was one hippocampus. But there's two sides to it. Who would know this if you're not a neuroscientist? And so I started studying trauma and I started studying memories. But there are two main ways that a traumatic experience can sort of mess a person's life up, even after the spiritual root has been dealt with. You just deal with the spiritual root, and then there's still a residue effect that happens. And that residue is oftentimes what people spend time like trying to rebuke and go after. But like if you deal with something with Holy Spirit, it's dealt with. It's gone. It's good. But then you have the problem of your brain. And your brain has been programmed a specific way, and we have to learn how to let the programming drift away and replace it with new programming. Make sense? Anybody allergic to animals, cats, grass, food? Okay, so I'm allergic to cats. I've always been allergic to cats, and my daughter talked us into getting cats. We found a mouse in our attic, called our builder, freaking out. What have you done? How do we fix this? He's like, you live on a farm. You need to get some cats. So we tell my 6-year-old, 5 at the time, I think, or she was 6, yeah. And we say, hey, we're going to get you a cat. So she goes, my wife takes her to look at cats. She finds not one cat, but 2 cats. And she selects them. We're going to go back and get the cats. Before she can pick up the cats, my wife gets a devastating call that one of the kittens had gotten sick and died. And so my daughter is extremely emotionally usually bonded with these pictures of these cats. And I was like, you're going to have to tell her that I'm not telling her that. Maybe I don't tell my daughter those things. I don't have the capacity to tell her that. So she does, and they go back to the cat place, and my wife calls me and said, we're getting 3 cats. How does this happen? Well, here's how it actually happened. My daughter had faith. She had drawn out a picture of 3 cats, 2 black cats and a gray cat. And that's all they had left, 3 cats, 2 black cats and a gray cat. And somehow she talked to my wife, Lindsay, just never send 2 prophetic people out on an errand together because they will prophetically cycle themselves up into... So anyways, they took over a portion of our house because we got them in winter. And so I lost a portion of my residence to these kittens, and they're so cute. But I remember one day I woke up and you know, I'm allergic to them. They mess me up really bad. My eyes, it's hard to breathe. And one of them walked in and I was just like, oh, you're so cute. Like pet the little cat. Her name is Jersey. And then I was like, go away. I forgot I'm allergic to you. And I go inside and I forget. And I put my contacts in. Like 30 minutes later. It's like, oh no. And I look full on demon possessed. It was right before an event, actually. And I was like, I've ruined my life. So I take them out. I'm like, God, please, just fix my eyes real fast, because I know what happens when I put cat hair in my eyes. I have to sleep to get it to go away. It's like, please fix my eyes before tonight, because people are going to think I'm possessed with a demon. And I'm not. I don't think. And the Holy Spirit says, that's exactly what happened with your minds. I was like, what? What do you mean? He said, well, the cats were no longer in the picture, but they left a residue. And the residue left a physiological response. And so it is with life. if you walk up and you touch something, you have a residue from it. And the same way people are going after these, traumatic moments, but there's a residue, but the problem is the residue is in your mind. It's in the systems of the mind. It's in how the memory is coming back up to you. So I'm going to teach you 2 ways that the memories in a traumatic experience can mess you up, and then we're going to talk about safety. And what I want to do is deliver you from the craving of safety. Because all of us have it. And in some regards, we're born with it, but we're born with too much. And you don't find God prioritizing safety. And that's a problem. Think about the Israelites when they are in between the Red Sea on one side and the army coming in on the other side, and they're camping there. Why were they there? God told them to camp there. What about Abraham going into Egypt? Why was he there? God told him to. God all through history will tell you to go to dangerous places. And so we have to reconcile our own cravings and our own desires, because if you're desperate for safety, you'll never be desperate for God the right way. Because this is not in his nature. He's going to take you to places that don't fulfill that craving. So we're going to have these moments where we're in a dangerous place. It doesn't look very good. And because of the heightened sensitivity of the moments, our neurochemistry can be hijacked. And it can be corrupted and twisted around. So 3 parts of the brain that are responsible for this largely is you have this part of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is responsible for threat signals. So it's a really good thing to have. You don't want to delete all fear. If you do, you die. These are the people who end up doing crazy stuff. There's a healthy amount of fear, threat detection that happens. This amygdala is kind of scanning all the time. It's responsible for sending these signals that if I say anything wrong, Dr. Russ, you fix it afterwards. It's finding and it's sending the threat signals that are very instrumental for our survival. And then we have to know what to do with them, because not all fear is equal, true? Not all threats are equal. So can you imagine if you never grow up from being afraid of strangers? Some people don't actually grow up from this, and they are afraid of things that don't make sense. But can you imagine if you clock the fear of walking into an event you don't know anybody on the same level as having a semi-truck running at you? And so our brain has got to have a way to isolate different responses to different threats. Not all threats are the same. So we have something in our brain that stores the context and the memory, sort of like helps you out with meaning making. It's the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is what allows you to understand how you're supposed to respond based on history, recency, whatever happened in the past. Make sense? When you have a really traumatic experience, there are glitches in how the hippocampus can record that memory. It's somewhat of a disconnecting effect from the hippocampus and the amygdala. They're not talking together the right way. And so there's 2 main ways, and both of these happen to me. The first is that the file itself is kind of stored in a corrupted fashion. So when something is like overwhelming and you're like, oh, I'm going to die, panic, you can feel it. It's a physiological response. The prefrontal cortex sort of partially goes offline and it loses its precision. So it's like if you wear glasses and you don't have glasses, you don't have something's happening, but you don't know what and when, and there's this weird printing of the memory. It doesn't have enough precision to tell you like that is not like that. They're different. It just sees blob. Make sense? Oftentimes when this happens, because the memory is not precise enough, it's stored with an extra load of emotion. So when you're recalling these memories, it's like emotion heavy. And because that's what it has precision on. not the details or the timing, but how did this make you feel? What's the physiological response to this? And so it's going to front load with emotion. If you've ever had a scenario happen where it doesn't make sense, but you respond with, you're like starting to respond in a way that you're like doesn't really matter. It's because there's some memory somewhere where it was similar enough, but it lacks the precision and it can't tell. And so it's just feeding you the emotion that kind of kept you alive last time. This would be like a corrupted file. Make sense? The second way that is very common for memories to be messed up inside of a traumatic experience is it doesn't store the memory in the right place. And so if you think of like long-term storage, this is where I started getting into the hemispheres of the brain. It's like actually trying to learn memory. Because the way that the brain accesses different memories is contextual. And so you have a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere. If anyone's coming to the Mind of God deep dive in January, we're going to go into a lot of this. But it will sort of like get stuck. So it will store it in a brainstem, or it'll store it in like the wrong place. It'll be somewhere in your body, and it won't fully make it through the whole cycle. What I loved yesterday when Dan said deliverance is processing. I don't know if anyone caught him saying that. I've never heard somebody talk about deliverance as processing, but that's actually really accurate, because it's actually processing and cleaning old memories. It's reprocessing them. And it has to go through its cycle. And so what was happening with me is I was feeling all of the feelings that were coming from memories and stress that was stored in different parts of my body, and I couldn't get them out of my body. My brain was somewhat okay, but I would go to sleep, I would kick back into a parasympathetic state, and then coming back, I was re-exposed to all of the feelings that were trapped from my experience. Does this make sense? In neurolinguistic programming, they teach that there are 3 different ways that you can really mess up a memory. One would be generalization. When a memory is so imprecise that it's generalized and expanded way beyond its scope. What are some examples of this? Yeah, but actual examples. No. Okay, fear of the government that applies now to your personal relationships. Let me take you through generalization it encompasses too much. It's not actually dealing with the situation. It's now being broken out of the situation and misapplied to every situation. So you get bit by a dog, and what do you learn? We generalize that all dogs are bad, and animals too. Screw them all. You give a public speaking, it doesn't go well, and now just being in front of people in general is generalized way beyond its scope. You're learning the wrong lessons. So we're misattributing the lesson that we were supposed to get from the memory or the experience, and we're now sort of applying it way outside of its boundaries. It's dangerous. The second way that you can corrupt a memory is the brain will delete certain things. Hoorah! Doesn't sound bad, but what if you remember the danger, but you don't remember the outcome? What if you remember that you were rejected by this person? You remember that, but you can't remember that you were accepted by this person. So we have arbitrary deletion based on what the brain thinks is important, which it doesn't always get it right. So you can delete whole sections of a person's memory. Now, they're still there. You can still access them, but they're not retrievable consciously. You have to go dig for them, or, surprise, surprise, you can ask the Holy Spirit, and He'll take you to them. Then the third would be distortion. Distortion, which is a wrecking of the meaning of the experience. It distorts everything that happens to you to fit a belief system or an emotional state. This is where we get into meaning making. We'll spend a lot of time today on meaning making. What does it mean? How many of you have had seasons of your life where you've been totally broke? I have. How many of you have had seasons of your life where you've been totally broke? What did it mean? That's a decent meaning. She said it meant I was young. That's okay. That's okay. That's an appropriate meaning. What would be a bad meaning to attach to that? Yeah, we know the difference between these things when we're thinking about them, but it's different when you wake up at 2:30 in the morning and you're not consciously trying to be like, what is the meaning of this experience that my subconscious is trying to feed me? We don't always go there, but they're in you and they're stuck in you. This is where a lot of unnecessary fear comes from. My problem, thank you, Lauren. My problem was I came out of this season in a way that I was okay, but it was stuck inside of me and my programming had not changed. So my entire experience had taught me that I must prioritize safety because everything around me is dangerous. And which gets us into the realm of the reticular activating system, some of the Newtonian science around what do you pay attention to? Well, you're going to pay attention to whatever's most important to you. And we'll get into that in a second. But can you imagine the consequences of having a default programming to be safe? What's your reticular activating system going to do? It's going to find every single thing in your life that can make you not safe. Everything. It's going to begin feeding them to you. And then, how many things are we going to be willing to reach out for and take? This all has an amplification effect. We can get into mimetics later. But the amplification is the people that you're spending time with, the locations that you're in. And so there were even certain moments where I would walk into a certain room of my house and I would just shut down. And when I went through it deeper, I was like, Holy Spirit, teach me this. You would bring back to memory a phone call that I had in that part of my office. And I don't know consciously, but there's something in it that's triggering distortion. This is why I'm trying to get you guys to pay attention to how you feel, because a lot of times we can't feel the difference, and so we don't know where to go to fix it. So I had to learn how to substitute these things around. And the reticular activating system focuses on three things. The first thing that it focuses on are things that are novel. I'm off of my notes just for the record. We'll hop back on in a second. Things that are novel or unique if they're different. So what's your name? Nobody's wearing such a vibrant color here. I'm just scanning the room. But we're all going to notice just the discrepancy. This is, wow. Oh, hi. Okay, hi. You can see these things happen where it's just not like, it's not normal. It's a pattern. It's a novel concept. But our brain loves this. They love it. This is why social media has hijacked the reticular activating system of the whole world. You go on Twitter and everything's novel and everything's crazy and it's all a bunch of brand new stuff. And our programming is feeding off of it. The second thing that we value or that we look for are things that we value. Values. It's important to us. If it's important, you're going to notice it. Lauren, you good? Yeah. Okay. The third are threats. Threat detection. Now, let me show this to you in a stack. Because we have these three things that the reticular activating system is doing all the time. Our next session is going to have a reticular activating system and values built together, and we're going to redefine our values. But what happens to a person who, number one, values safety, That checks off a value, correct? And then the RAS is already programmed to isolate threats. It checks off a second value. And so 70% of my entire brain all the time is constantly looking for threats, problems, areas of dysfunction, things that could hurt me. So what I learned how to do is I learned how to go in and relabel my life with a better program. And I said, God, I don't want to be obsessed with my safety anymore. I want to be obsessed with growth. I want to be obsessed with trust. I want to be obsessed with insert whatever the thing is. What happens with the reticular activating system that's now primarily obsessed with growth? What do you notice? You know, they did this study one time where they had a bunch of people line up and they had them select whether they thought that they were lucky or not. And then they tracked them, and everybody walked by money on the street, and only the lucky people saw the money. Yeah. They've done this experiment several times with different things, but whatever you prime and program your brain to be and to look for, it will find.